All right. How are you doing today?
Doing good, doing good. Beautiful day, as it is every day here. It's a beautiful day.
Every day is beautiful. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know, Sergey is the co-founder of Chainlink, and Chainlink is the leading decentralized Oracle network. I think for the people that either haven't built on Chainlink or aren't as familiar, could you give an overview of, how has the platform evolved from, the pricing oracles to kind of what you guys offer now?
Yeah, sure. So I think the security model of our industry is there's independent nodes that come to consensus on something, and that makes it more deterministic and reliable than the traditional system. So blockchains generate consensus on transactions packaged into blocks that have relatively limited scope. There's not that much data you can put in there. There's some computation that can happen, and primarily it's used to create like a token ledger in most cases, and to then use those tokens for voting or for value or for any number of steps. Oracle networks, decentralized Oracle networks, which Chainlink invented, use consensus to prove things about systems that are external to the blockchain. And the reason that's important is because if you're providing the value of a smart contract as something that's deterministic and guaranteeing outcomes, and then you connect that deterministic guaranteeing kind of agent or piece of code to another system that controls it, your real risk is now in that other system, right? So your total risk for the thing you've created boils down to how that other system that controls the contract or is connected to the contract is secured. And it turns out that all the other systems around smart contracts, whether they're data systems, identity systems, payment systems, or even other chains in many cases, are not able to interface with contracts. And beyond not being able to interface, they're not able to guarantee certain security and manipulation resistance that is necessary for making a more advanced smart contract. So the initial kind of body of work of Chainlink was to apply consensus to market prices using decentralized Oracle networks, and that being done successfully led to DeFi. So DeFi was a sub-100 million industry with 10 to 15 total protocols when we started, and it grew to over 200 billion, with Chainlink consistently powering somewhere between 60 to 90% of all of DeFi, and today Chainlink also powers the majority of it. And the reason that basically DeFi came into a greater stage of growth and existence, in my opinion, is because Oracle networks came into existence and allowed both parts of the application to become reliable and deterministic and guaranteed through consensus, right? So blockchains generate consensus about the contract code and the token ledgers, and Oracle networks generate consensus on everything else. Now that world of everything else is a very big world because it's everything else. And it turns out that Oracle networks can generate consensus about a lot of things beyond price data. So then initially we expanded Oracle networks to come to consensus about things like proof of reserves, identity data, weather data, all kinds of different data sets. Then there was a question of, can Oracle networks generate computations unrelated to data that have value? The first thing that was put forward in the Chainlink system was the random number generator, which clearly had a lot of value because, well, it's very widely used in gaming and NFTs and various other smart contracts. And what that actually showed us beyond data was that the pattern of making more advanced smart contracts is on-chain code defining the conditions of the contract, Oracle networks allowing those conditions to operate. So if you look at DeFi, you have the on-chain conditions of the contract, and then you have Oracle networks feeding in price data to allow those conditions to operate. If you look at gaming, you have the on-chain conditions of the contract, and then you have the random number generator, which allows those conditions to operate. And both of those things need to be secure and reliable, and done in a decentralized, consensus-driven way in order for people to trust and put value into that application because it's reliable. So after random numbers, we expanded to automation. Automation is basically the ability to kick smart contracts when needed, various other key basic tasks. Then we moved on to functions, which is a way to put generic computation into an Oracle network. And then after successfully basically providing the most data on chain and successfully launching computation-based decentralized oracles that are the most widely used for the most value securing applications, we moved on to also applying decentralized Oracle networks to the cross-chain connectivity problem through something called CCIP. And so CCIP is using decentralized Oracle networks in the Chainlink framework that have already enabled over $10.5 trillion worth of transaction value for over 4 years, approaching 5 years, without value lost. And we've kind of arrived at a place where you can build an advanced application that's multi-chain, that's connected to multiple pieces of data, and that has additional computation surrounding it that the chain doesn't do, all powered by Oracle networks with a single set of security guarantees and a single kind of security model that your user base can trust and rely on, right? So the way to think about decentralized applications is, here's the smart contract code, here's the piece of data I need, here's the automation I need, here's the cross-chain connectivity I need. If any of those three things fail or are manipulated, your application fails. Your application loses money. Your application goes down. If you write high-quality smart contract code that's audited, then you connect it to a reliable decentralized Oracle network like Chainlink to get the data you need. Then you connect it to a reliable decentralized Oracle network for automation. Then you connect it to a reliable decentralized Oracle network for a cross-chain connection to a source of liquidity or another set of contracts you want to use. Then you have a feature-rich, secure, more advanced smart contract. So that's kind of the place we've arrived now, basically because decentralized Oracle networks can generate highly reliable consensus on many, many things. And I actually expect them to generate consensus on even many more things, including things like AI models and all those types of things. Even the interaction with AI, I think, will happen through Oracle networks.
Got you. Question for you. We're in this, universe where seemingly endless amounts of new chains are launching. We have this massive fragmentation. Seemingly wallets are not getting better. What do you think it's going to take to stabilize kind of the multi-chain universe? And what's kind of Chainlink's role in that?
I think the way to just like ran over here basically. So I think it's not going to get stabilized in the sense that there's going to be a huge increase in the amount of chains. Like the amount of chains out there is only going to increase because every blockchain L2 framework, every L1 framework, everything is just being made to generate more chains, right? The model before was, let's get a singleton, let's get a single instance where we have native composability, everybody has a wallet or an address in that instance, and we get kind of native composability and connectivity between all the wallets. That was the old model. That is really not the model the vast majority of blockchain technology companies are pursuing. The new model is, let's simplify the creation of replicas and do load balancing, right? Let's make everybody have L2s. Let's have people have L3s, yeah? So if that's the technical direction, then, and it continues to become cheaper and easier to make your own chain as a bank, as an insurance company, as a gaming company, as whoever. So in terms of stability, there's just going to be even more fragmentation, even more chains, frankly. The other big dynamic feeding the creation of more chains is VC money. As long as VCs can make money by flipping the token of a new blockchain, there will be new blockchains. There's a very large incentive. I made a new blockchain technology, yay for me. I got my VCs, the VCs flipped the token, they were successful. Guess what? The amount of VC money willing to invest in that just 10x. Do it again. That's kind of, the big incentive for new blockchain technology. There's going to be new technologies and more fragmentation on an individual kind of user level. So one of the only things that can bring some measure of an ability to manage that is a single interface and a single protocol that can connect all of those chains and allow easy interaction with all of those chains through one integration. So what CCIP does is really two things. The first thing it does is it has something called the blockchain abstraction layer. through which, this is more for traditional enterprises. A traditional enterprise that doesn't want to deal with hundreds of blockchains can interface with CCIP, and through CCIP use hundreds of different blockchain technologies efficiently. And they become future-proof. They don't care about the next blockchain technology that VCs want to flip a token for, or the next blockchain technology that the bank counterparty wants to do. So that's one of the first things that CCIP does for the traditional world. For the traditional world and for the Web3 world, it creates cross-chain connectivity with a number of features that abstract away the complexity of chains. So one of those features is programmable token transfers, where you can basically wrap instructions around the token such that those instructions can be executed for that token when it reaches the destination chain, which means your system does not need to go to the destination chain and integrate and generate wallets and have a relationship with that chain, because the CCIP system will wrap whatever value you send there in instructions that are executed once it reaches that chain, right? So at the Web3 level and at the traditional level, CCIP is basically a data transfer and a value transfer protocol together. And one of the big pieces of value there is that if you tightly couple data and value, you can actually wrap the value in instructions that get executed when the value reaches its destination. Right? So CCIP is both data transfer and value transfer, like very tightly coupled, generating all kinds of very cool features like programmable token transfers.
Got you. Not all VCs are that evil. But in general, since we kind of broached the subject of finance, we've had this pretty interesting shift this year where, finally we went from kind of DeFi universe being kind of all the finance, in the space, to asset managers moving material capital on chain. Is there something where, that has happened recently, in the space, or that's really driven the shift? Is it the ETFs? Is it something on the kind of technical side that is all of a sudden pushing asset managers to move the capital over? Because if we were having a conversation, with the BlackRocks of the world several years ago, we would have, all thought that they're crazy, or we were crazy for saying that we should have large, again, material assets on chain. But that's changing very quickly now.
Yeah, even 2 months before the Bitcoin ETF, if you asked people in the crypto community, what do you think of BlackRock, of the 20 or 30% of people that knew what that was, they would tell you, I hate them, that's the man, I'm against the man, fight the man all day long, right? But then 2 months after the BlackRocks of the world make the Bitcoin price go up, everyone's like, you asked them what BlackRock is, 90% of people know. And they're like, wow, what a great group of people, let me tell you all about them. Larry Fink, what a nice man, right? Like, it's very simple. There's a word for this, it's called economics, right? And the economics of the traditional system is very, very large, right? That's very large economics. And what all of this ETF stuff is like a very, very, very small shadow of what it even is, right? It's like it's an unbelievably small, minuscule percentage of the amount of value in the traditional markets. Like the traditional markets have hundreds of trillions of dollars, hundreds of trillions. Personally, I think all of that value will eventually be reformatted into the blockchain format. And I think the crypto community, through this Bitcoin ETF, now the ETH ETF, wow, what an unexpected outcome. Now the ETH ETF, and then 15 other ETFs, and like 500 other ETFs later, I think people are going to be like, it turns out that once you do enough market penetration in all over the world in consumer markets, and the retail hedge funds and the prop traders kind of get the industry to $10 trillion, what's next? Like, where does the other $490 trillion that this industry is going to secure come from? Well, turns out it comes from the place where it is, which is the traditional financial system, right? And so the challenge is, how do you convert and transfer all of the value in the traditional financial system into the blockchain format of value? What are the things that need to happen? And eventually we'll be in a world where the way a DeFi protocol is successful is by allowing all the users in various large asset managers and banks to use that DeFi protocol. Because those users will just keep their money in those places, and those places will generate on-chain wallets for those users. And the question will be, how did those on-chain wallets generated for those users interface with the Web3 DeFi things? And the answer, not surprisingly, and in like a very self-serving way, is Chainlink, right? And I'll explain why. So the reason is transactions, right? So how do transactions work? Transactions work on the basis of the creation of an asset. You're not going to really create an asset in the real world asset sense, which is the industry I think you're talking about, without data, right? Real world assets are generated only through data going on chain to be attached to the asset. Whether that's a real estate asset or a carbon credit asset or money market funds or tokenized funds or private equity, each of them needs different pieces of data. Then you actually need additional data like identity data to even move those assets in a way that the banks and all these asset managers can do that. And then after you actually agree that you want to move it, I send you a stable coin, you're going to send me a carbon credit, you need a system to send it, right? You need a system to send the stable coin, you need a system to send the carbon credit between chains. Because once again, as we said a minute ago, there's going to be a ton of chains, everyone's going to have their own chain. Like making a chain is going to be eventually as cheap and easy as making a database. And that's where CCIP comes in. On the data side, there's the Chainlink data side, and there's a whole bunch of other computational around that we don't have the time to go into. But the way I view all of this now is, what is needed for a transaction to happen? What's needed for a DeFi transaction to happen is unregulated DeFi price data. That's enough. What's needed for a DeFi transaction to happen across chains? Price data and a cross-chain correction, cross-chain connection. That's it. That's all that's needed. What's needed for a transaction to happen between the unregulated DeFi thing and the regulated capital markets thing, where we literally have users that we work with that have a single bank that we work with would have like 1 trillion assets under management. It's like a single user has pretty much half the amount of money in the whole industry. So it's like, it's insane. So there's like a lot more data, right? You need the same price data, you need the cross-chain connection, you need identity data, you need some NAV data to comply with some accounting rules, you need all this stuff. So what Chainlink is basically doing at this point is generating all the data, all the computation, all the cross-chain connections that are needed for people to generate assets, generate smart contracts, and generate transactions. And it's really the measure of transactions that I'm looking at. How many transactions can be generated between bank chain A, bank chain B, and public chain C? What is needed to do that? How does central bank digital currency as a form of payment fit into that? And does that increase the amount of transactions? How does the creation of more real-world assets generate more transactions, more value in our industry? And just to be super duper clear, the capital markets, the banks, the asset managers, as they make chains, initially they will put that value and that form of payment on their own chains. But eventually that value will also interact with public chains. And that's another big thing we're doing, is we're just creating the standards for both of those worlds simultaneously.
We've been talking as an industry about real world assets and tokenization for such a seemingly long time, but now that the seal has been broken with ETFs, what do you think is going to be the next big push in terms of assets that get tokenized, and how you guys look at that as Chainlink?
It's very, very hard for me to say. It fundamentally depends on the emergence of a secondary market for that asset. So if there's a secondary market with a lot of liquidity, a lot of market depth, a lot of people wanting that asset, I am positive that there's a lot of people that are going to generate inventory and pump it into that market. So the real question is, what secondary market will emerge first for real-world assets? There are really like two groups of assets, two ways you can think about it. One is a core set of financial assets, like treasuries, like core financial products that make up the majority of the financial system. Money market funds, treasuries are good examples. Very core, very fundamental assets, nothing new about them, extremely, the most widely used thing in the financial system to store value and gain an interest on value. Then you have assets at the edges. These are new assets that have not existed in an easily transferable, fractionally ownable form, right? These are things like tokenizing private equity funds, tokenizing real estate, tokenizing carbon credit, tokenizing gold, tokenizing things that it was previously hard and complex to own, and hard and complex to have smaller individual pieces of ownership. Which of those, I can't even tell which of those two categories is going to emerge. The argument for the core money market fund, real world asset thing is that it's a stable asset that a lot of people want. The interest rate on these assets is very high now, and it's a very good form of collateral that eliminates risk. So I imagine that I know that there's a lot of on-chain DeFi protocols that want to diversify their risk by having collateral in the form of on-chain treasuries and money markets, because it is so different from crypto, right? The failure mode of many protocols like Terra and others in our industry has been, you are backed by crypto, you have a fantastic day 364 days out of the year, and then you blow up in that one day because you are like so indexed towards crypto. And that like happens again and again. That's the case, I think, from the Web3 point of view. From the TradFi point of view, it's collateral management, which probably this group is not interested in, so we won't get into that. For the assets at the edges, it's really anyone's guess. If I had to guess right now, I would say carbon credits are probably a leading option, because it's a big industry, it can function without regulatory clarity, and there's just this big trend in the banking sector of like carbon credits, green, generate more carbon credits. And the carbon credits also have a big fraud problem, where basically they can be double spent. Basically, like, you cannot tell if a carbon credit has been redeemed, and if you cannot tell if it has been redeemed, you can fraudulently sell it to someone else. So it's like a very basic data problem. And if you just verify that the carbon credit has not been redeemed and is still valid, and you write that data into an RWA about that carbon credit, you've seriously put a dent in that fraud problem, which is another reason I feel blockchains and smart contracts can be very applicable to the carbon credit market. So probably I would say carbon credits.
Well, since I have you on the hook talking about the future, lots of builders, developers in the room, what is some advice that you can give folks in terms of, building the next breakthrough thing, on whether it's on chain or it's on chain like in general, what are areas that are left unturned or unexplored, or where you're seeing really interesting work that really hasn't been overly financialized yet, and there's kind of interesting computer science happening?
I mean, the first thing that I would say, just from my own experience, is you should work on something that you find interesting. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't change what you work on. So if you find DeFi interesting, go from doing one thing in DeFi to another thing in DeFi. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't just work on something to make money, basically because it's going to be very hard. And if you don't find it inherently interesting in some way, you're going to become depressed and quit. And that is the most common failure mode in the first 5 years of doing anything, is people get depressed about the thing they're working on because they don't have any kind of real interest in it. So if you're asking for advice, my first piece of advice is, regardless of what anyone tells you is hot, this is a great way to make money. I got into the blockchain industry in 2010, back when it was Bitcoin only, and Bitcoin was on the news about being used for dark markets as a form of payment. So everyone I would go to and talk to about Bitcoin, they would ask me, what do you do now, Sergey? What do you, like, people I knew? And I would say, I work on Bitcoin stuff now. And they would say that drug thing, and like, I just found it interesting, right? So my first very, very strong piece of advice is, no matter how hot something sounds, if you're not at least somehow interested in what it actually does, do not work on it. Because I have yet to meet a person who is able to overcome all the friction and pain over the 5+ years that it takes to make something if they are not somehow interested in what they're making. Like, that's really the first thing, beyond any technical decision. Now, the thing that you could think about being interested in, I just want to couch it in that sense, right? Like, these are the things you might want to think about being interested in. DeFi, definitely. This is going to be another big wave of DeFi for sure. Real-world assets, the tokenization of things in the real world is and connection back to the real world in a data-driven way. Gaming, blockchain gaming is a real thing, and the incentives and unit economics of gaming can be really changed with blockchain things. So like GameFi, and the interaction of gaming and DeFi is an interesting intersection, because you can create all kinds of incentives for people around games that have never existed in games before. It's also getting easier and easier to build games, so maybe there's something there. And then, other than that, I wouldn't go into TradFi, I wouldn't go into capital markets, even though I've talked to you a lot about that, because that costs a lot of money to do, and like many, many years to get right. I mean, I've been, for example, working with Swift for over 7 years. So, like, you got to really be interested at that point. So, you know, capital markets, go work with banks, make technology for banks. Takes a lot of money, a lot of time, and you actually probably really have to know something about that, or like get really, really lucky and have enough time to learn it in the way I have been lucky. So those would be my recommendations. But I know this is a hackathon, and people are kind of thinking about what they want to do. And the first thing is really the most important thing. If you're not interested in it at some level, I really wouldn't continue.
Makes sense. And you know, I think first time visiting Dubai, and you know, save for you know some of our challenges with the weather, how have you found the community here in terms of crypto adoption and builders?
So builders, I haven't interacted with as many builders during this week because it's been a lot of more kind of senior meetings and presentations to all kinds of actually capital markets folks once again, but
Sorry.
So I don't know enough about the builder community. This looks pretty good, I would say. So I recognize some of the people that I know that build things, so they're here. So I would say just my cursory understanding on the builder side is very positive. Generally, beyond that, I think this place has a very big future as a hub for our industry. I think there's going to be 3 very big hubs for our industry: Singapore, Hong Kong, and Dubai. And eventually they'll also do transactions between each other, which is kind of what I'm trying to work through at this point. But I think Dubai is definitely up there. I don't know where it is in that top 3 list, but it's definitely in that list. So it's definitely one of the top places in the world to build all this stuff, both because of the regulatory clarity, the amount of smart people here, the amount of money that can invest or use the product, and also the whole place seems to really be on the upswing. Like this place seems to really be going up and to the right. Growth, you know, that's always a positive dynamic. It's a neutral place. There's not that many neutral places in the world, and it seems to seek to be genuinely neutral, which is actually in line with the ethos of the technology we build in this industry. And so I think that's also very compatible.
Final question, you know, what excites you most over the next year or two in the space?
In the whole space?
In the whole space. Not capital markets related.
Not capital markets related? Okay. That eliminates like half of my answers. So I guess in the DeFi Web3 space, what excites me the most? I mean, I think it's the things that I said that you folks might want to work on, frankly. It's that same list. Basically, DeFi is going to have a resurgence. Real-world assets is something that's growing rapidly. There's a lot of great firms building that. Blockchain gaming and game finance, GameFi, like the interaction between gaming and DeFi, I think has a lot of very powerful dynamics. All three of those things. Since I can't mention capital markets, I won't mention how there could be hundreds of trillions of dollars eventually flowing into our industry from there. So won't mention that. But other than that, yeah, these other things are. I think the thing that I'm excited about seeing and have not seen enough of is usability. So I know a number of people working on usability, and I know a number of people on solving. Yeah, that's another thing you might want to work on. That's a very valuable problem. Is how to make private keys and blockchains and DeFi protocols more usable without people having to remember a seed phrase or like all this stuff, right? Like the usability of our industry is still nowhere near Web 2, which leaves it being not too competitive in some categories of assets and apps. So usability, I think if I were to see more scalability from blockchains, better usability generally, and more high quality assets generated in the Web3 space, that would really, you know, up the whole thing over here on this side of the equation.
Yeah, build better wallets, guys. Sergey, thank you so much for your time today. and hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in our humble village by the sea.
Thank you. I think I will. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.